You ever watch any of Iron Pineapple's videos? No? You should change that, he's great. Anyway, he has this series where he plays Souls-likes that are buried in the depths of Steam's Souls-like tab. It's a fun series to watch, makes you appreciate the good ones when you see the not so good ones. But in one of those episodes of this mini-series, he comes across this game called Clash Artifacts of Chaos, and I thought it looked so cool, so I put it on my wish list and realized a few weeks ago that it's coming out really soon. I remembered how much I enjoyed Thymesia, another indie Souls-like I took a chance on, so what's one more? I want to know if this thing turns out to be another hidden gem too, so let's jump in. This is Clash Artifacts of Chaos. In the decaying land of Xenozoic, there is only one law, and it's known as the Ritual. A game of dice that decides the odds for combatants in physical altercations, deciding who will have these magical talismans known as Artifacts of Chaos used against them. Such is the case for this old man, losing the game and his life, leaving his grandson, this little bird dude, alone and defenseless. Luckily, this monk just so happened to be passing by. This is Pseudo, and after taking care of the bandit, he promises to escort the boy to Gemini's palace. Gemini being this monstrosity that rules over the land. The residents of Xenozoic don't speak highly of her, so her status doesn't strike me as the most democratic of elections. Turns out the kid has some sort of special power to curse and heal people, and of course Gemini knows about it and wants it for herself. Pseudo doesn't like the vibe he gets from Gemini, so he says that's not happening, and that was the correct answer to receive a one-way ticket out the window. It's now up to Pseudo and the boy to collect the 4 grand artifacts and take on Gemini to figure out how to save the land of Xenozoic. The story is nothing we haven't seen before, and it particularly can't help but find some similarities with God of War 2018 in more than a few ways, but in this aspect we have the stoic father figure traveling with a wide-eyed child, with the kid being far more optimistic and willing to look at the glass half full, but good God, you would think he was trapped in a blizzard with how much he complains about it being cold.
Pseudo, I'm cold. I don't like it. Pseudo, I'm cold. The wind is too freezy. Pseudo, I'm cold.
Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!
Pseudo, on the other hand, was raised as a hardened monk. He doesn't really let emotions cloud his judgment or way of thinking. He's very pragmatic, seeing the world from a bird's eye view a lot of the time. When the boy asks Pseudo what he thinks of the afterlife, you can tell he really doesn't have much to say because he was always taught that you're supposed to make the most of what you have now. And while this might make Pseudo sound like a boring protagonist, the truth couldn't be further out. He might be analytical, but he has the best personality. Pseudo is always poking fun at the world around him, pointing out the absurdities in the way this crazy world operates.
Fellas, let's just fight. This is boring, and I get very cranky when I'm bored.
His dialogue and characterization is honestly what makes the story work for me. I was genuinely invested. If it wasn't him telling us about Xenozoic and how things work in this wacky place, it was his banter with the boy. While I am growing a little tired of the whole curious, innocent kid defrost the brutal and capable father figure trope, I give it a bit of a pass here, and Pseudo is a big part of that. I cracked many a smile at how many times he throws out a one-liner and puts up his dukes after some craziness, but Xenozoic is the other part of why I was so engaged. Again, the world is full of these eclectic creatures to interact with. Some may be good for just a conversation, some may be willing to help out Pseudo like the traveling merchant Io, some may have nothing on their mind but killing Pseudo by any means necessary, and some might do both. There was never a single moment where I was bored by what I was looking at or listening to on screen. The monster designs in this game should be studied, they're so good. This game is one of the most visually unique games I think I've ever seen. The way everything looks straight out of a watercolor painting or a pop-up book is a sight to behold. I can't help but admire how everything looks like it has sketch lines too. You can really see how much effort went into the rendering style here. The skyboxes are fairly subdued, but I can almost guarantee that's to make the environmental details that stay in view pop out even more. Seeing these out of focus landmarks when halfway across the world gives the game a sense of density that's hard to nail unintentionally. It's a game made using Unreal 4, and man is it a testament to how far a team can push that engine when they have a solid vision. Every character has these little details that make them all look so deformed and messed up in the most interesting way possible. There are occasions when the frame rate stutters, particularly when sprinting between areas, but it never lingered beyond a few seconds or caused me to take unnecessary damage, so I'd say it's passable. I really have nothing but praise for this game's visuals. It looks absolutely fantastic in every way to me. But now we need to jump into what you'll be doing as you run across the land of Xenozoic. Being trained as a monk in this cruel land no less, Pseudo is a proficient martial artist. He's capable of throwing out a string of basic attacks with the X button. He can charge up a heavy attack by holding down that input. 3 separate special attacks on Y can be equipped at once, a dodge button on B for short bursts of movement, a forward-facing jump on A can be used as you'd think, as well as flowing into a jumping attack. The left bumper activates a parry that can absorb attacks and fill up this super meter. When it's filled, activating it will transition the camera to a first-person perspective and allow Pseudo to perform some basic punches on one enemy, and then a flashy finisher for big damage. Okay, these are the basic building blocks that the combat system is built on. Let's get a little more specific though. During his travels, Pseudo will come across these statues, and after interacting with them, he'll be secluded with a single enemy. After defeating them, he'll be granted a new special move or an entirely new stance. Stances are wholesale new movesets, a new string of basic attacks, a new charged attack, and a new jumping attack. New special attacks are also found, giving more options for the player to approach fights. In the beginning, I favored the lightning stance for its quick strikes and fast nature. I tried the heavy stance for a while and it was alright, but I eventually found my favorite in the shadow stance. It was similar to lightning by way of how quick it was, but the attacks have this mini explosion on the end of them, which came with an extra bit of range. The charged attack also lunged forward quite a bit and had a decent blast radius. It was extremely reliable for taking out weaker enemies that didn't know I was there just yet. And for special moves, I ended up loving the multi-strike for the distance on that initial lunge and the high damage it can output in a short time. I loved the teleport ability. It sends out a projection that Pseudo warps to, and it can even go through enemies, making it pretty satisfying to teleport behind an enemy and then lay on the damage. And then the ultimate move in the game, no joke, the rock toss. It is a game changer, and I'll tell you more about it later. These stances and skills are only made more effective by finding these figures and sacrificing them in incense burners, giving stances more attack and stun power and upgrading aspects of the special moves. The teleport eventually gains so much distance that I could skip past enemy encounters if I didn't want to fool with them. But you might not want to try that with every fight, seeing as how we're in RPG territory as well. That's right, Pseudo has a stat system that skill points can be allocated to. I didn't realize this at first either. Modern gaming has made me so used to seeing experience points flashed on the screen, or at least add to my total somewhere like in the corner. But you have to check the menu to see your actual experience bar, or just do what I did and check back at the camp whenever you pass one to level up. That is until they fixed this problem in an update during my last hour of recording, so now we have numbers on the screen, hooray. Anywho, there are only 4 stats though, so it was never a big deal contemplating on what stats I would want to prioritize. I usually just made sure strength and health were a margin above the 2 resistances, and it was smooth sailing for the most part. There are a few sets of armor you can equip to give some small boost to Pseudo's attributes, and there are even some weapons that can be purchased or found to deal out extra damage. The combos for these weapons are always dreadfully stiff though, so I only really used them if I knew the enemy was weak, slow, or both. And you might not even be able to use them due to the game's namesake, the Artifacts of Chaos. Intelligent beings in Xenozoic follow the one law. I don't think it's stated what the law is verbatim, but it essentially means that everyone is to perform this ritual before any type of fight. This ritual, in actuality, is just a game of dice. Each participant rolls their dice onto a mat and then takes turns playing tonkas to diminish the other's dice count. The tonkas have different actions tied to them, things like reducing every dice's value in a small circle by 1, destroying one of your opponent's dice along with sacrificing one of your own, flipping a dice to its opposite side, throwing a spider with 6 dots on the field to add to your count. There are a ton of them, but the goal is to make sure your dice have more value when both players' tonkas have been used. The winner will have their Artifact of Chaos's effect inflicted on the enemy at the start of the fight. The artifacts can be simple rules to follow, like the winner gets 1 free lick before the fight starts proper, or a small arena is made if the enemy steps in or is pushed out, Pseudo gets a free hit. Or like I mentioned, it can stop everyone in the fight from using weapons. But there are also more supernatural ones, like enemies taking damage from bugs if they stop moving, a dense fog shows up out of nowhere and disorients enemies, making it great for fights against groups because they'll swing wildly and hit each other. Or my favorite one, the Blood Pact. It's risky, but if you play this artifact and win the fight, you can then use the same artifact in another fight to summon the enemy you had previously beaten. It allows you to do some cool stuff like summoning a boss to fight a group of enemies with you. The artifacts of chaos are pretty cool. I dig the concept of altering the parameters of what can really be unfair fights in your favor. It surprised me initially though that the artifacts are all disposable. They seem like things that you would have to accumulate and then have to use as you see fit. Upgrades, in other words, to add to a broad collection of options. But nope, they're all just one-use items. Problem is, if you don't get down with the ritual, you might not find yourself enjoying the game as much. Matches don't usually take long in the game early on. Everyone only has a few dice and 3 or 4 tonkas to play, and then it's on to the brawl. But when you get towards late game, everyone, including Pseudo, has 3 cups worth of dice that are thrown out at separate times, 6 or 7 tonkas to play. Matches start to drag out and become a little exhausting. There is an option to let the boy play for you, and I thought that was a good solution, you know, make a skip button, let chance take the game to get you right into the fight if you want, because ultimately you can still win a fight even if you lose the ritual and have some awful artifact played on you, but the game still makes you observe every turn. Even if the game is playing against itself, you're forced to watch. You don't have to activate the ritual when coming up on fights, you can ignore the one law and just attack, but that means you'll be missing out on using the artifacts and really potentially useful ones like the Blood Pact. And you will want to use the benefits the artifacts provide because combat can actually get pretty challenging. As I've mentioned, Clash has some Dark Souls elements to it. The stat system is pretty similar to the Soul stats, and the campfire's influence should be obvious. And as such, comes with a certain expectation of fair but fulfilling difficulty, and to be honest, I don't think Clash hits that balance a lot of the time. Combat is decent, landing blows feels nice, parrying and dodging work how they're supposed to, but my issues mostly lie with the enemies. I never feel confident when I approach enemies because of how much they fail to telegraph their attacks. If you're making a game where enemies are extremely dangerous and every encounter must be taken seriously, that's totally fine, but you have to make sure your enemies are readable and manageable for the players to react to. There were so many times where that was not the case in Clash. Some have grab moves that come out in only a few frames, and you can't help but look at the screen a little sideways after that happens, or the ones that activate these extremely damaging moves that come out again within a few frames. It's not enough time to react at all. In a Dark Souls game, I can understand why enemies don't have more indicators like some games give, but From Software's games have gotten really good at making lead-ins for attacks of all kinds. Therefore, they don't need something like a glint before a parryable attack. But Clash is one of those games that really could have benefited from a little extra heads up, because how it is now leads to moments where an enemy behind a barrier separating levels can finish me off with a pebble. If you're not going to make the lead-in animations, then can we at least settle for some sort of visual tell? At least an audio cue would be nice. Make them scream something crazy like they always do in these fights. A lot of these moves are perfectly fine. These sweeping attacks that you can clearly see coming and can act accordingly, these are great. But so many of the attacks come out too fast, and that's when the camera system isn't being a headache. Look, I'll get this out of the way now because I know I coincidentally look at games with this camera system a lot and complain about it every time, but I still don't think it's a good camera system for this type of game. I do appreciate the FOV slider so I can pull the camera out and see more of the fight, but I would still prefer the ability to just run around in a circle without the need to move the camera. It makes fighting multiple enemies, which is already frustrating, an exercise in futility. It's so easy for enemies to hit through one another and clip you. They can harm one another, which is always fun to trick them into doing, but it's next to impossible to harm a group of enemies that only have eyes for you. So that means you either have to leash 3 beefy enemies into killing each other while you run around like an idiot, or get one hit when it's completely safe and then retreat to do it again. That's not a good fight to me though. The game calls these enemies intelligent. You mean these intelligent enemies? Yeah, that's next level smart right there. That's not an isolated instance either. Enemies can just be dumb altogether. It's sad to say that I found a pretty reliable way to deal safe damage with my Rock Toss special move, and after putting some figures into it, its damage and range only increase. Not to mention it got buffed again after that update that came out towards the end of my playtime. The move was given a reticle so I could aim it freely, which was more handy than I think the devs intended. It was the most important part of my arsenal later on in my playthrough. Oh, but early on, on. Okay, so I can admit towards the beginning of the game that I accidentally went to a late game area once I was set free in the hub. Enemies were putting me down pretty easily while I wasn't putting a dent in them. I was aimless, not really having a great time for that first chunk. That is until I turned around and found the actual first area that was way easier to deal with. I started getting better with combat too. Turns out the game really wants you to prioritize canceling moves into dodges to do more powerful moves. So during a combo, after connecting a hit I believe, if you press dodge you'll flash white, meaning you actually have invincibility for a few seconds. And each stance has special hard-hitting moves if you attack after that dodge, with unique moves for backwards, forwards, and side dodges. I didn't discover this until later on, even though the tutorial taught it to you. I just didn't quite understand what it was teaching me at the time. I was trying to parry most of the enemy's attacks because that's just me. Is what I do. But after learning you could chain these dodges into attacks and then back into dodges to back into attacks, the enemies just started to fall a little more easily. But this now came at the cost of clarity in these fights. Very rarely do I classify a game as button mashy, but I think that's what I have to liken it to. I felt like I was spamming my dodge and attack without a whole lot of thought. It wasn't devoid of thought or reason, I was still engaged, but it felt a lot more chaotic than I would have liked, I think. The game did start to go my way though. I was progressing, I was unlocking stuff, I was having more fun. I started to understand the little nighttime mechanic as well. This is an interesting one, but could have used a little more time to cook. So when Pseudo dies, this wooden avatar thing awakens, and if you can make it back to Pseudo's body, you can get back up. Dark Souls shit. But you can also choose to go out at nighttime and explore a small area of the open world at night. You can't explore everything though. They cleverly darken the path that you're not meant to travel to keep this thing streamlined. They actually take this to the extreme in one section where Pseudo has to travel halfway across the map, but the path is left in color, meanwhile everything else is bleach white. I thought this was so cool looking, but anyway, sorry, back on topic. There are these thorny bushes that Pseudo's flesh can't get through, but if you go back there at nighttime and pass through with the wooden avatar, you can explore and find some useful items and even open up new routes to get stances and moves during the day. It's actually pretty cool, and it started getting even better after finding these extra parts that the avatar can find at night. I think they increase power and stuff, but I can't find any concrete description anywhere in the game. I'm pretty sure I was knocking people out a lot faster after I got this chess piece though. I would give Clash a good grade overall. I think it gets exponentially better the farther you go into it, unlocking moves and upgrades for said moves, but it sucks that these extra moves and abilities are good for getting you around the jank that you'll have to deal with. And when the combat works, it can feel awesome, but it's rare for it to all feel good or that you have full control over a fight. I think the ritual is a really neat mechanic, and I love how they subvert expectations sometimes. Like the one time that dude ate the dice before we could even play the game, that one took me off guard. That was awesome. But I also just like the ability to alter a fight like that, and it just sucks that it becomes a bit more bloated the more complicated the matches get. I love the Metroidvania style of backtracking all over Xenozoic to have more interactions with the world, and oh my god, the world is incredible. I genuinely can't tell you guys how much I with the weirdness that this game is full of. And Pseudo was such a cool dude. I love the sass, and the voice is perfect for his character. Pseudo for Smash, that's what I'm saying. I'll vote for him in the ballot whenever the next Smash game comes out in 5 years or whatever. So the ending of the game is also a little weird. The whole Pseudo starts calling the bird kid his son. Like legitimately, he's just like, oh son, oh, I don't go please, because he now wants to go with his old master to space, to outer space now in a spaceship. I don't know. Like I never played because it's there's Xenoclash 1 and Xenoclash 2 or whatever those games are called. I never played those, so I don't know if like it actually makes sense in context. I don't know. Let me know down in the comments if it does. And I do want to thank you guys for your patience waiting for the next video. I know it's not a big deal to you guys probably, and it doesn't seem like a whole lot of time has passed since the Hi-Fi Rush video, but it feels like it to me, and I feel bad that I'm not able to crank them out faster. But I have a video for Wolong Fallen Dynasty coming really soon. I'm doing the co-op thing, what I did with Evil West. Me and Nick are playing through it to see if it's a good co-op game and or a good game just in general. I also really appreciate you guys participating in that poll. It really helped me line some ducks in a row. I saw that you guys might be a little interested in Doom Eternal and Pizza Tower. I'm super interested in Pizza Tower, but we'll just have to see how it goes. Resident Evil 4 Remake comes out really soon, so I'll be getting that probably after the Wolong video, but anyway, I appreciate you for watching, so thanks for stopping by, and have a great day.